Farming Forum today. This is webinar number 2. I'm sure quite a few of you joined us last week, but for those of you who didn't join us last week, the event was recorded. The slides are available and it's also viewable on YouTube, but any problems with connecting to that, if you want to see that, then please contact the Office of Cotswold National Landscape. A few things, housekeeping. If any of you aren't on mute, please now mute your media, and also you can turn your video off, please. That would be helpful.
All right.
And so today we have a farming and water theme, and we have 2 speakers lined up for you. The first speaker is Andrew Russell from Natural England. He's the Catchment Sensitive Farming Officer. And the second speaker is Matthew Izod, who is a farmer, and he farms by Chipping Norton, and he's going to share his insights and experiences. If we could ask for comments, Q&A session to go into the chat bar, please, and these will be picked up after we finish with the second speaker. Thank you. Andrew, over to you, please.
Thank you, Nick, and good morning, everybody. As Nick said, I'm Andrew Russell from Catchment Sensitive Farming. I've sort of come back to the Cotswolds, really rather sadly, after my colleague Sarah Olney passed away at the beginning of 2020 last year. So I live in the local area. My main role is actually air quality lead for the southeast region and ammonia, but that's not the focus of today. So I'll just talk you through CSF and my thoughts for where we are with watery issues in the Cotswolds. So not in any particular order, but I'm going to just kind of try and cover these sort of various themes, how and where we work, particularly for the Cotswolds. I'll talk a bit about warmer, wetter winters. We'll have a quick glance at the scheme tiers. I know that much of this was covered probably by my colleague Harold last week, but it's an important subject to just get right. What's actually out there in Countryside Stewardship and how can it help, and a few sort of very important key dates and messages about the scheme, and a few sort of useful tools and further information. So CSF, it's been around for a long time. It's essentially a part of Natural England. It's a project between DEFRA, EA and Natural England. And essentially we work with farmers across a number of high priority water areas throughout the UK to basically improve water and work towards sort of helping the Environment Agency get rivers back to a good ecological standard. But basically we're working with farmers to just keep things like pollutants like pesticides, phosphate, nitrate out of our rivers, and that's really how our basic ethos works. So where do we currently work? Well, this is the high priority water area for the Cotswolds and surrounding catchments. This is currently where we're able to operate and where we're able to offer our support. We are rather hoping that this will change next year. You can see on the outside of the red areas, there's a sort of mustardy colour area. We have put bids into DEFRA to work outside of those areas as well. And this is going to be particularly important for our air quality role because obviously the air covers the whole of the patch, not just the red areas, but it's where we're focusing our efforts currently. So if you're applying for a stewardship application, we've got a couple of key dates here which are really important. If you want us to work with you on some of the high priority items in countryside stewardship, things like yard work, tracks, concreting, those kind of things. You need to get skates on quickly and request our approval for those in the high priority areas before the 19th of March. And I have to say that, you know, we are seeing a really high number of requests for our endorsement and application advice coming in. That window stretches out a bit further if you're looking at a 5-year mid-tier scheme. So that's not until the 18th of June. We've got that deadline, so a bit more room for manoeuvre there. So just a real quick blast through this. You know, a lot of this is very well known, but main scheme objectives are biodiversity, which includes woodland, improving water quality, and now air quality is a theme within countryside stewardship. And these all, you know, are linked to flood risk, the historical environment, and, you know, climate change adaptation and mitigation. Some really quite big significant changes this year in the capital grants. They've been rolled into one. So the capital grants, which were what we would call water capital grants, have now been rolled into the boundaries grant. And there's also an offer for air quality improvements if you're dairying, for example. You know, some good options in there for reducing ammonia emissions from farm. You know, things like scraping, automatic scrapers, and low emission flooring for livestock housing, which are on slurry-based systems. So the mid-tier scheme, you know, very broad range of options. It's competitive, but, you know, good scheme, and gives you a bit of access to some wider amounts of capital funding. Useful scheme. And then obviously higher tier, you know, much more tailored management with a Natural England advisor to provide some very specific management. You may have a site of special scientific interest on the farm, but, you know, again, you know, much more focus on biodiversity and the actual themes that you have on your farm. So facilitation fund, not currently open at the moment, but a useful tool to bring farmer groups and focus groups together. And then the woodland options, which have been around for a fair time. So as I said, the new capital grants, that's really quite exciting. I think that's really, you know, increased the interest this year. We've got a sort of a maximum fund for each of those themes of 20,000, which you know, just gives you a bit more flexibility if you've got some real water quality improvements to do in a farmyard. Tends to be focused on, you know, more of a livestock scenario, particularly where, you know, clean and dirty water separation is what you're trying to achieve, and just reducing those pollutants and that runoff out of the yard and into your local watercourses. So as I said, I won't dwell on that, but air quality now an objective in stewardship. And if people have got queries, you know, I'd be happy to answer any of those after today. Educational access, you know, really important to get you know, young people out into the countryside and understand what actually happens on farm. You know, now available in mid-tier as well as higher. So the standalone capital grants, 67 items in that scheme, and that includes, you know, your usual boundaries grants, so hedgerow restoration, new hedgerow planting, perhaps you know, some coppicing or laying of an existing boundary. Water quality we'll talk about in a bit more detail, and air quality. And again, 20,000 for each of those categories, up to a maximum of 60,000 per application, and one application per SBI per year. Also really worth noting, if you've got an HLS scheme still running, those capital items are available for an existing HLS agreement. And also, if you've got an existing mid-tier wildlife offers agreement, one which doesn't include any capital works. So a bit more flexibility there. Good to see that as well. Might just help you sort of meet some of your aspirations if you've got some willow pollarding or something that you wanted to do on your tier agreement. You know, a useful tool to make use of that funding. So really onto today's theme. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, we really are suffering from the effects of climate change, our warmer, wetter winters, hotter, drier summers scenario. You know, rainfall intensity and in volumes, you know, really has been significant, particularly over the last 2 winters. You know, we've seen, you know, some flooding and, you know, lots and lots of runoff. And, you know, I've walked a lot of land this winter, you know, rills and gullies forming in fields that, you know, I've probably not seen previously, you know, because we think that soil type is a lot less vulnerable, but, you know, it's very, very stark and obvious to see. No farm wants to lose soil from his field. You know, it takes a long time to get soil in good heart and in a position where you want it to be productive. But, you know, I think we really have got to, you know, work an awful lot harder than we have been to get our soils in a better shape. And obviously, you know, the soil type is very important. Not much we can do about that, but, you know, how we manage it, you know, is very, very important. And particularly during the winter, you know, what cover have we got on that field? You know, could we do something better to keep the soil in the field? You know, have we got an extreme slope? You know, there are, you know, is a question, you know, should we still be growing a crop on this field? You know, would we be better off having grass? But, you know, low soil organic matters, compaction, surface capping, you know, all of these lead to runoff, soil loss, and, you know, water pollution, which, you know, getting in our rivers and streams, covering up sort of spawning gravels in our fast flowing brooks and streams, obviously damaging that habitat. And then ultimately, you know, obviously, you know, we've seen some quite significant flooding. So what can we do? I mean, I'm just going to talk through, you know, a few scenes that I've seen this winter. You know, do these seem familiar? You know, I think to many of us, we've seen quite a few pictures like this. You know, unfortunately, when soil runs off a field, we've got this rainfall at this very high intensity. You know, soil, you know, really struggles to take and infiltrate water in these volumes. So we've got to really think about managing how we cope with that, and how we keep it in the field. What can we do? Picture on the right is a field very local to me, and what you're actually seeing there is that, you know, it was a massive wash through the winter. You know, lost much of that field soil. It looks like Brighton Beach when you walk across that field. Huge soil loss, and, you know, massive damage to that field. Very little cover on it. You know, it's a reasonable slope, but clearly the volumes of water coming through, you know, impossible for that soil to cope with it in that state. So, you know, you cover crops, you know, a really, really useful option. You know, I think we've got to, you know, just make sure that we're using these a bit more extensively, thinking about where we put them, particularly on vulnerable fields. You know, great for soaking up that nitrate left over post harvest, and also, you know, really important as a part of a component in a good, healthy arable rotation to you know, build a bit of soil organic matter over a period of time. They won't build it overnight, but it's a good contributor and far better for intercepting rainfall and keeping soil in field. This is another popular option, particularly if you've got fields where, you know, you're struggling with blackgrass. This is the option AB8. 2-year legume fallow. Really useful tool for building fertility over a number of years, and also for building organic matter. And if you've got some steep sloping land, why not use an option like this to just get soil in better heart. Okay. So maize, always a difficult one. Can we
Thank you, love.
Can we manage our maize a little bit better? Should we be using our enhanced management of maize option, which encourages you to grow an earlier sown variety, one that matures quicker, get it off early, and then get a cover crop into the field, or like this farmer's done, picture on the right hand side, getting some grass undersown between the maize, so that you've got something in place to keep soil in that field over winter. Another very useful option, this is often a conduit or a pathway from that pollution source into a watercourse. A really rutted track, is a really, it's like a highway for that sediment and phosphate pollution into a watercourse. Use the stewardship option to create yourself a decent livestock or machinery track to get access to those areas of fields and reduce that pollution. So this is a very, very popular option, a complete no-brainer in my view. We've got a hedgerow with a ditch on the left-hand side of this arable field. Beautiful, lovely tussocky grass margin. It's protecting that watercourse from anything that's going on in the field, fertilizer, pesticide applications, and should there be a runoff incident, it's going to do a really good job of just capturing some of that soil and stopping it going to the watercourse. Picture on the right, obviously, that wasn't in place in this particular field, and as you can see the height that the water has rushed through. See where my arrow is on the height of the hedgerow, and it's just dumped lots and lots of soil into the hedgerow and then ultimately into the ditch. So buffer strips, really useful option. Not an uncommon scene, not the tidiest farmyard in the world, but we've got some really good options in yards to help with infrastructure. Obviously this is a point source pollution. All we want is a pathway to connect this to a watercourse, groundwater or surface water, and this is going to cause an issue in our watercourse. Not a good place to be, but we've got plenty of options for separating clean and dirty water, getting clean water out of yards, off of roofs and diverted away, and really tidying up those yard areas with some useful options. So it's a useful resource. So I'm just going to share with you these couple of slides. These are a part of our sort of advice program. Just gives a bit of indication about what options are suitable in certain situations. So have we got a problem with our soil? What are the issues in there, and what options have we got in the stewardship toolbox to help manage those? So cover crops I've mentioned, 2-year legume fallow, management of maize. Really useful tool just to sort of help you get to think about what's available and what options will help solve those problems that you've got on your farm. This one's very similar, but just looking at the situation in a yard. What can we do with our roof water? Where can we divert it? Can we use it for livestock to drink? Perhaps we can use it for sprayer filling. Just real useful tool to just link what issue you've got to what options are available. So next steps. I mean, if you've got an issue on your holding you're keen to talk about, you need to get in touch with your local catchment officer. There's lots of information on gov.uk under the Catchment Sensitive Farming banner, but of course you can always get in touch with myself. And now I'm very pleased to say we've got my colleague Ros Garner, who has joined me in the Cotswolds to help out. So please do get in touch with us if you've got a project or an application for stewardship you'd like to talk through. Please do just get in touch and we'll try and talk you through that. A few dates again, just pop these up just to remind you about the deadline. So if you've got a capital application and you want our support for that, 19th of March, that's looming, sort of 10 days away. We need to hear from you quickly. And then a few more dates as regards ordering application packs. End of March for a higher tier application. End of April is the application deadline for your capital only grants. And then end of May, last date for ordering a mid-tier or a wildlife offer pack. And then related to that, getting our help and support by mid-June for a 5-year mid-tier scheme. And then end of June for a mid-tier pack. And then final deadline, end of July for getting everything in this year. We're hoping that we'll be moving to monthly start dates as we did in the old days with ELS and HLS, but watch this space for that. Right, that's me, Nick. So back to you.
Thank you, Andrew, for walking us through your presentation. A lot of information there, and I'm sure that people make the best of it when they revisit the slides and today's presentation. And they've got a bit more time to absorb all the information, but some really positive sources of funding there as well. Right, without hesitation, if we could move on to Matthew's presentation, just to remind our audience, please enter the chat box with your Q&A and we will deal with the questions at the end. Thank you. Over to you, Matthew.
Morning, everybody.
Oh, no, come and do them. Yeah. Sorry, I can see the slides later.
So good morning, everybody. So I'm Matthew Izod. I farm on Priory Farm. So today I'm here to talk about, we've just gone into a mid-tier scheme, but also we've got something else going on the farm with Thames Water. It's a quick introduction. So a family-run farm, 500 acres of purely arable. We used to be a dairy farm in the early 2000s. But Dad's decided that arable was more for him. And we've been reaping the benefits of lots of grass lays and that for the last 10 years after, but we're just now starting to really see the land is starting to get depleted, and I think we need to have a change of direction. So we've got 5-year rotation. We've just started looking at some linseed. We're struggling with the oilseed rape, main crop of wheat for us. Beans and peas, we've been getting on with fairly well, and we're following with another mill and wheat as that's our main staple. On a min-till based system, which I find min-till is quite a varied term really, because it can mean deep cultivations, which we're doing. We're still using a subsoiler, but min-till comes under that because we're not using a plough. So I find that take that as you would. So this is our no-till trial site, which we're working with Thames Water. We've got a 5-year scheme with them, working also with innovative farmers. And Andrew Russell is actually the manager of our trial, which that's really helpful that we've got access to someone that's got a bit more knowledge about these different schemes and access to some funding that Thames can give us. So it's a fully funded trial. All our fixed costs they pay for, which takes the risk out of it. It's a bit more, we can be a bit braver. So it's working now in year 3, and we're just really starting to get into it now. We're in the Evenlode River catchment. It's really important to look after the rivers for us. We don't want to lose our soil into the river, and for the public. And really, I think it's about time farmers did sort of step up and say, right, we need to sort out what we're doing as well. Thames point of view, they're exploring loss of soil into the river, especially phosphorus runoff into the watercourses, and how can no-till help farmers and the wider environment. So we're tasked with using no-till methods and overwinter cover cropping to see if it helps with the runoff. So out of the 500 acres, we've only put 9 acres in, 2% of our land in the trial. So it's not a lot, but it's just enough to make us feel confident that it's not too much, not jumping in at the deep end, but also a big enough area to actually get some on-farm trial and at scale. So year one, we planted spring barley, and on the right-hand side, we cultivated with a pigtail tine cultivator, which were roughly about 4 or 5 inches. And the other side, we hired a drill from a neighbour, and he just put the seed straight in, and that's as simple as it was on year one, and didn't know much about it, and it seemed to go okay. This was the main flood we had, which to me, after the last 2 years, this is nothing, and I thought, okay, well, this isn't too bad. The barley wasn't affected. You can see the slight in the picture where the river runs. It's found its own course through the field. This is the yield map we took, and both parts of the field yielded practically the same, which was quite good for the first year. We were fairly confident we were fairly confident in the results, and it gave us it sort of put down what we were doing was the right thing for the time being. We took some baseline data using the Healthy Soils report through our agronomist, and it did open my eyes to a few bits that I thought were okay. What we were doing was fine, but it did open our eyes to rethink. Really, what we thought we were doing right isn't quite right once you start pulling it apart. We had a very dry spring in 2018, and you can see from the soil, just a sample here, the aggregates are very large. They were very hard to break up, and it doesn't seem to be a lot of life in this soil, which, considering the results, I thought it was okay, but clearly it shows a slightly different picture when we start to look at the full data. I'm still struggling to quite understand this myself, but you can see while organic matter on our no-till side of the farm is 9.5% and 12% on the tilled side. So when I've been reading about this, I always think that the organic matter is meant to, the higher it is, the better the soil, and that, but from the picture previous, that's not showing it's not really showing that's a workable soil. Also, another note to take from this data was the amount of nutrients that are actually locked up in the soil that just aren't available. We've got a massive bank of nutrients that we can't seem to get to. We can't get them. We're putting on the nitrogen, we're putting on all the different nutrients, and they're in the soil already. How do we get access to this? Equally, to save ourselves money, to make the soil more usable, and just we shouldn't be putting on these inputs if it's already there in the soil. We can see the deficits of magnesium, potassium, and sulfur. That's money that we've got to put onto the field. We've got to buy these inputs, even though in the totals there's plenty available. So we did an infiltration test as well on the 2 sides of the field, and on the no-till side we had 22,500 mil an hour. We couldn't measure it quick enough. It went really well, and that's considering we've just literally drilled it, and that's no different. That's no improvements. We haven't had a cover crop or anything this time. on our farm standard with the pigtail, where we're trying to relieve the compaction from the previous harvest, we couldn't get the water to run away. We left the water on the same spot while we did the other tests, and we still couldn't, even after an hour, which is a bit worrying, I think, when what we were trying to achieve with the cultivations was infiltration, trying to get rid of the compaction, and actually we've created a problem. That's a real eye-opener. I think if you wanted to do a trial on farm, that's the best place to start. You can do that yourself. You can do an infiltration rate test quite easily. So year 2, we harvested the barley and it was all okay. So we decided we got it off early, that we put some oilseed rape in, and I thought, well, we'll try some companions this time just to aid the rape and see how if it helps the crop at all. And if the rape did fail, we also have then the cover crop for the winter. We also purchased a new drill just for direct drilling capability and to help with the thinking of we're trying to be a bit more low disturbance across the farm after borrowing the neighbour's drill. We had Earthwatch, a charity, global charity, came and put some coppiced bundles in, which I'll show you a picture of them later. That's another thing we're trying to do with our trial site. We're trying to invite other companies to come and do some work on the field and just see what other ideas people have got that we can do to help with saving the erosion, keeping the soil on the field, and trying to get a more broader, open ideas from other people. Really, I think you can sort of get stuck in a bit of a rut, thinking you're doing the right thing. Maybe we need to have second opinions. The confidence is growing in the early stage of direct drilling, and I hear that quite common, that it's all okay at the start, and I am now starting to see my mindset. It's a struggle. 2-3 years, especially after these 2 wet winters, it's a real struggle to keep confidence in it. This is what during the rape, you can see we're moving hardly any soil. I was quite pleased that we've opted for a tine drill, so there is a bit of disturbance, unlike a disc drill, but I think it's good enough. It's a nice start. You can just see, so we've got the rape, and we had to do some buckwheat on there. I'll have to. You can just see the soils is a bit better, it's a bit more friable, but we're still seeing a few larger aggregates in year 2 that we can't break down. And this was the first flood. So this came end of September. So it's a bit practically worse than the first year. And I thought, okay, well, the rape did manage to survive this one, and it was not terrible. Left a bit of, it did move all the debris, did leave all the harvest residue into, which created a few slug problems. But this is what came next. And this is what we're really struggling with the last 2 years. I've still got to work out if these fields, after Thames have finished with the trial, we need to sit down and have a real look. Are these fields still viable? Because in a dry year, in a normal year, they grow some really good crops. This is the Earthwatch coppiced bundles. So it's all natural material that can be returned to the field once they've rotted down. They're on a neighbouring farm as well. They've come and they've done this free of charge. We've allowed them access, and they come and do some soil testing and bring some students out onto the farm, which I think is a really important thing. They bring people not involved in agriculture onto the field. They have a chat with us. They get to have a look what we're doing. We get to talk to them, see what they actually think of farming, and see what they think about what we're doing. It's quite a good way. It does catch the residue. This year we're actually putting in a 6 metre margin just to try and aim to stop this, because it does, after a few floods, it does disappear. This was after the first or second flood receded, and you can just see the field on the left had been previously ploughed, and it's quite wet. This was 3 days after the flood, and the no-till side, the infiltration rate is really working well. You can see the difference. It's quite dry. We've just got the odd pool of water in the low spots, but on this right hand side, that far corner looks drier than it is. Plenty of big earthworms getting in the soil, and we're now starting to see the benefits of having a living cover on the soil all year round. The roots are really starting to work. You can see that's quite wet through the whole profile, which I know we sort of want to keep the soil dry all the time, but it's getting away. The worms are doing their job. They're creating the drainage channels for us. This is the rape underwater, which it didn't favour that very well. So this is as far as we could get, just short of 15 inches of water. It was a lot higher. This is as far as the wellies would reach. So the rape was replaced with the peas. The flooding just made it not viable really. The majority of it gone, which was a shame because it was a very good crop before the autumn came. We were pleased with the peas, despite being told that compaction is one of the biggest issues with peas, and they're quite susceptible to reduced yields if you've got quite high compaction. But they seem to, the roots were coping really well. They were getting down really as far as I could sort of dig. It's amazing what's going on underneath when the plant isn't very good. And they seem to be a great soil conditioner. And I think that's where now we're thinking, farming wise, we need to be thinking what crops benefit the soil, not just the immediate short term. We've also got to be thinking of the long term gains. Headlands are still they're performing well in the direct drilling system. I think we've got a bit more of a traffic. It can hold the traffic a bit better. This is year 3, so we got the peas off. Unfortunately, with the peas, we did have a reduced yield, which is the only issue. I think in the flooded areas, the peas they did suffer quite badly. From I think the compaction we actually can't sort out. We had a bit of a dig down, and we're seeing compaction 12-14 inches down, which I think we still struggled to sort that out effectively. So we did see we were 1.9 tons a hectare in the no-till, and in the cultivated side that was 2.6 tons. So a massive difference. Really, it's a shame, but it's what really on year 2 and 3 you start to see that if the yields dip away, it's really hard to keep going. But thankfully, Thames have taken the risk out of it. But equally, I think that's for your own good. You need to sort of just bear with it and keep going. And if we've got a nice small area, you can afford to do it, I think. This year we decided on a radish, mustard and buckwheat cover crop. It established well. We spread this on with the combine the day after the combine. Spread this on with the quad bike, sorry, the day after the combine had come out of the field. And we had a few mixed results. You can just see at the top left, there's a bit of a bare patch there, but overall it was a quick and easy establishment. Within the hour you had it on the field. These 2 fields by the meadow, we have to cross a railway and it does take a bit of time to get round to them. So it's not the easiest at harvest time to get to them. So what's next? We've just taken out a mid-tier stewardship agreement to help with our future plans. I'm really focusing now on keeping a living cover on the fields all the time. So we've taken out 70 hectares of cover cropping across the farm, which I really think will help. This year especially, we've really struggled we've lost a lot of wheat, we've got bare ground, and it's gone down really tight. We've also moved to, we're going to try some shallow tillage, moving the top inch to 2 inches across the whole farm, and see if that can just bridge the gap between the yield loss of direct drilling straight away and just sort of wean the soil off of heavy cultivations. We've also gone from 9 acres of direct drilling in 2018 to 70 acres now. Just a little bit of, we just got a bit more confident, and it's working okay. there's a few things we need to change. I think it's more of it's not just putting the seed in the ground like I first thought. There's a whole, it's a minefield out there, but it is easy. It's easy to get your head around it once you've done a few years, and we're getting there. We're also now helping to form a farm cluster to learn from neighbours and work as a collective. That's also part of the wider schemes. I think that we want to work with other organisations and have a big farm landscape scale schemes really across the whole catchment that really help the wildlife and the wider community. Also, I'd really like to, I think now with more conservation agriculture and that, I think there's probably a push that maybe we need to get some livestock back on the farm and start to get that organic manures back on the fields and get rid of these inputs. I just thought I'd finish with a nice photo. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I do post a bit on there, and if you want to get in contact, there's my email address. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Very interesting. It's always good to hear from a farmer who's making changes, in this case as part of a trial and assessment, but it would seem as though you're engaging with the a new scheme, and you've been convinced to make some effective changes. So it's and the more you can share that with other farmers, the better. I mean, there's a lot of benefit in that. So moving now to the Q&A session, and we'll run through it in the order that it came in. So there is a comment there from Catherine Mack, who's one of our board members, fascinated regards no headline focus on soils. This refers to Andrew's CSF presentation, talking about many benefits that can be accrued with biodiverse soils and capacity to withstand waterlogging, etc. And Catherine is a farmer in her own right, and that she's found the benefits from good rotations, use of deep rooting crops, etc., improving drought and flood resilience. Andrew, do you want to just say anything about that?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, no, absolutely agree with those comments. You know, I think my main point is that, you know, even if we've got an absolutely fantastic soil, which is the best it absolutely can be, you know, if it's on, you know, a steep slope and with the amount of rainfall and the intensity we're getting during the winter, you know, sometimes we just cannot stop that runoff. But yes, I'm absolutely 100% agree that, you know, we've got a lot of soils in a very poor state, and, you know, we've got to work as hard as we possibly can to increase our organic matter levels, you know, get a nice wide crop rotation, and as Matthew says, I mean, you know, I think, you know, in some instances, you know, getting livestock back on a farm, you know, to even widen that rotation even more with some grass, you know, is a great opportunity. You know, unfortunately, a lot of the infrastructure that supports livestock has gone on a lot of arable farms, but, you know, we need to have a long, hard think about, you know, how we can get that back, and get our soils in a much better state than many of them currently are. Can't keep getting it from a bag to make the soils better. That's the more on principle. You can't keep putting more on. You've got to do something about it. So
yes, thank you. And I mean, Matthew, my observation regards those fields, if they're frequent flooders, as a practicing arable farmer, I would be looking at finding ways of funding, perhaps to remove them from an arable sequence, and perhaps put a permanent, I know that your arable philosophy is permanent cover, but perhaps grass them down and find a way of alleviating the financial risk, and also pesticides entering the water. I mean, do you agree with that or not?
That's exactly where we are at the minute. just trying to work out sort of if we want to try the no-till, see if it's made a difference, and I feel it has. But is it viable to keep going for years and years? That's something that the jury's always out.
Could I just add a note that I've sent to Matthew, that I had a problem very, very like what he described in his talk, with a small area, about 40, 50 acres of my farm, fairly level like yours. And so we started using lucerne with seed. I hasten to add, we bought from the Cotswolds Seed Company, and it transformed the situation. It broke up the plough pan, it stopped the flooding, it particularly helped us with getting a deeper soil, richer soil, so we didn't have so much drying out in the summer. It was magic, it was amazing. It's blooming difficult to get in the first place, but once it's established, it builds up the fertility. And then our cereal crop that followed, which we had 3 or 4 years of, was just brilliant. We didn't use any fertilizer at all because the soil was so good. It really is possible to change your soils if you get the right rotation. So
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for that. Next question. What percentage of the Cotswolds is high priority for water quality capital items? Are these fixed areas? Will farms in medium priority areas ever have the opportunity to access the water quality grants like concrete yard renewal? Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I just tried to answer a few of those questions in the chat. So, yeah, I mean, the current high priority water area for the Cotswolds mainly covers the river basin of the Evenlode and its tributaries. So, you know, the sort of Glyme and the Dawn over in the east, you know, out to sort of Morton in the Marsh in the west. But, you know, if you want to check if you're in the high priority water area, magic.defra.co.uk is the best place to go and look at the Countryside Stewardship targeting layer, and that'll tell you. But as I said, phase 5 next year, which will start in 2022, we've submitted a bid to DEFRA to expand our remit to the medium priority water areas. So I do hope this time next year, you know, we will have sort of doubled our number of catchment sensitive farming officers, and we will be able to deploy those options. You know, I'm a great believer in the advice being given where it's needed and where the help is needed, and that will help us to do that. Yes,
and if people want to engage and then find that they can't get the funding, it's somewhat of a turn off. So the bigger the areas, the better, I think, if it's going to achieve good outcome. You've answered quite a few of these in the chat box already, specific to the grants and the caps. TB is a problem restricting livestock. I think that's a statement more than a question. There's a bit of feedback, may help if you mute or not. So I think you've covered off most of that. There's one from Ed. All this action seems depressingly short-term, immediate, even, full stop. I was at Ag College 40 years ago, where soil quality, soil conservation, key subjects. And yet we're seeing slides and evidence around me here in South Warwickshire of dreadful losses of topsoil. More important, it needs to happen to be in the best place in another 40 years' time. This just can't be about capital grants. Well, I think we all agree with that. I mean, it's about education, it's about engagement, and measuring the problem and responding to that with, if the challenges are there, then the advice and the support and the schemes are equally there. But I mean, yes, I was at Ag College in the 70s and in the 90s, and all about soil and water quality and environment. That was very much part of the syllabus. I'm sure it still is. Anything to say, Andrew or Matthew?
Would you like to go first, Andrew?
Oh, go on then. Well, no, I mean, I completely agree with that Ed, that statement. I mean, you know, we've seen some big contract farming agreements. You know, some are good, some are bad. You know, we've lost a small mixed farm. You know, arable soils are hugely damaged and depleted, you know, through many reasons, you know, recreational tillage and, you know, long sort of term sort of stripping of soils, you know, P&K indices where they're contract farmed. You know, it's just got to stop, you know, and you know, I think there is so much advice out there about how important it is to get on top of your soil. You know, agronomists, you know, we've got some really good agronomists coming through that, you know, now understand that for long-term sustainable use of our soils, you know, we need some help and we need some advice, and that is a, you know, it's a long-term prospect. You know, that might mean some fairly radical changes, widening of rotations, getting livestock back in, you know, using legumes and grasses to build fertility. You know, there's a lot of work to do, but you know, there's a lot of advice, and if you're in that situation, get some help.
Thank you, Andrew. Matthew, if you could make this your final comment, and then I'll wrap up. I'm conscious of the time, but please respond to that, Matthew.
I just want to echo what Andrew was saying. We had Andrew come out and do a farm walk with us before we did our mid-tier application. And it's a really fantastic opportunity to get someone out on farm who's connected to the schemes. It's got a bit more idea of the nitty gritty and can give you really valuable advice. And I urge anybody you've got a question, get someone from your local catchment sensitive farming group to come and actually get on farm and talk to you. There's no emails, and phone calls are okay, but it's once the times are a bit different, get someone out on farm and really get some help. That's why we've gone into mid-tier, to just help with our long-term plans and sort of try and sort our soil out. But thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. So I'd like to bring the meeting to a close to meet our hour's time slot. Andrew and Matthew, I'd like to, on behalf of the Cotswold National Landscape and the audience, like to thank you both for giving up your time and making some very interesting presentations, informative. I'd also like to thank the team at the CNL and hand back, well, thank the audience for joining us today, but just before you go, hand back to Scott Brown, who is our Cotswold Champions Project Officer. Scott, would you just like to say about the next webinar and any other events that you've got coming up?
Everyone, yeah, thanks for coming on to this one. Next week, we've got woodland creation and management in a national landscape. So we've got Mark Malins from the Forestry Commission, who's going to talk about various schemes and grants that may be available. And then we've got Mark Connolly from the Cotswold National Landscape, many of you will know, who's going to look at how best to sort of implement schemes and things, tree planting, woodland and stuff like that within the Cotswolds National Landscape, what works, what doesn't work. I'll send links around so you can register for that after this, as well as slides from the presentations today. I'll get this up on YouTube as quickly as possible as well, so you can go back and listen again to parts that you missed or want to review. So it's all up there. I'll share contact details if people are happy with that as well. Make sure you sign up to the mailing list so you'll get the announcements about the webinars. We are just firming up details for the week after next on a sort of introduction to regenerative agriculture as well, which is sounding really interesting to finish this short series. We'll be sending updates on ELM and Farming and Protected Landscapes programme as more information comes to light on those things as well. But yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Scott. That's very helpful. We'll close the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.